Okay, we're going to be talking about a really important idea, which is building codes. Whether you're a civil engineer or an architect, you will get good at reading building codes. And from here to the end of the year, you will be reading more and more about building codes. So a little background on it. This is actually something that goes all the way back to Babylonian times, and it's been improved on throughout, the history of mankind. Starting in Babylonian times, in 1780 BC, so 4,000 years ago, they started making rules. If a builder builds a house for someone and does not construct it properly, and the house which he built falls in and kills its owner, then the builder should be put to death. So they started with very serious codes, holding people accountable for what they built. You don't have to write this part down here. I'll tell you during the video when you need to start taking notes. So clearly, what we're doing with building codes is we're making people accountable. We're setting up standards because you expect when you buy a house and your family moves into the house that the house is in fact safe. And we can be assured of that, or we should be able to be assured of that, because there are building safety standards that we use. There are lots of cases of engineering failures or architectural failures where things have collapsed. For instance, this is a bridge collapse. The fire of the 1880s, the 1800s. This is a great fire in Chicago. And it was because of the building standards at that time that it was as bad as it was. And this prompted new building standards to prevent something like this from ever happening again, or hopefully prevent. Our first major U.S. code came in 19... Please make a note that our first code was in 1915. You don't need to write the rest of it down, but know that we started making U.S. codes about 1915. And these were not adopted across the entire United States. Notice that this first started in north central and northeast states. With a little history of the U.S. and where the U.S. started, this should make sense that closer to Washington, D.C. would be where we were more interested. Also remember the Chicago fire was in central north, so this is why this area of states was concerned about this. Then, about 5 years later, we had a new code out of California, and it was adopted by everything west of the Mississippi. Leaving the Southeast as the last states to adopt a code in 1940. If you think about the kind of states we have in the Southeast, it kind of makes sense that why they might have been some of the last ones to add stuff. Finally, we started the International Code Council. This is where I'd like you to start taking notes on this and go ahead and write this part down. It's the ICC. These are the same codes that we use now. And it's a uniform system of codes because we realized that having different codes in different states was not really a good idea. 1994 formed this here, and the first edition of the International Building Code was published in the 2000s. So this is a pretty new thing, and this is the codes that we're going to be looking at throughout the year. You don't need to write all these down, but I do want you to look through this list. You'll notice there's a residential section, building, mechanical, plumbing, energy. So basically all of our sections that we're concerned with when we're building homes or commercial buildings are included in this code. Again, you don't need to write this part down, but this is the part of the code that we're going to be using, the International Residence Code, and some information and some code requirements that I'm going to give you in a future video do come from this actual code here. Notice here on this section that it does include all sorts of components. There's a requirement for everything. And as I said earlier, we're not going to require you to look up your codes now, but later when we get to commercial projects, you will be looking up your own codes on this. In this project for our house, I'll just be telling you the codes that you need. One thing that I do want you to write down is, what does habitable space mean? That's living, sleeping, eating, and cooking. So what are we leaving out? We're leaving out bathrooms, closets, hallways. That is not considered habitable space. those are our service areas. So you'll notice that when we talk about codes in the next video, that we talk about some requirements for habitable space. You don't need to write this down, but they divide up the code into different areas, and we'll be giving you information in each of these. Ceiling height, for instance, is set at a minimum of 8 feet, and that is what we're going to use in our house. We'll be talking about some requirements for the bathrooms and the minimum room areas in the next video, where I'll be telling you that. We do have to have emergency exits, which in our case will be a window in every room so that someone in case of a fire could get out of the bedrooms. There is energy efficiency requirements, and we'll talk about that later on. Just as we saw in the Habitat for Humanity, the code, International Residential Code, also gives us some information on climate zones. Once again, I'll be later telling you where we're going to locate our Habitat for Humanity house, and that will make some differences when we start talking about what kind of foundations we need, what kind of trees we should put in, etc. So that was the stuff we listed in this. Just make sure you've taken the couple of notes that I specifically said so that you're aware of the building codes here. As I said, we'll do a lot more with building codes when we get to our next project after this one.